Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are really getting into the weeds. We're talking about the complex machinery that runs modern enterprise revenue.
We are. Things like subscriptions, B2B commerce, usage billing, everything in between.
And to do this, we've kind of synthesized a huge stack of reference materials. Specifically, we're looking at the knowledge base for consultants who work on these advanced revenue cloud systems.
That's right. And our mission really is to give you a rapid structural understanding. We've distilled it down to 10 core technical mechanisms that solve the toughest business problems in this whole digital commerce space.
So if you've ever had to manage things like complex pricing or amendments mid-contract, or just make sure your revenue recognition is completely bulletproof, this is your shortcut.
Exactly. We're moving past the what and diving straight into the how-to.
Before we jump in, though, it's probably worth framing the challenge. Like, where does the complexity actually live in these systems?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. If you look at the functional distribution, the heaviest lifting conceptually happens in two main areas.
Yeah.
First, there's configure, price, quote, or CPQ, and then the core revenue cloud platform concepts themselves. Both of those have the highest functional weight. It just shows how complex it is to define and then calculate a sale.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It really confirms what you feel intuitively, that getting the sales motion right, the configuration, the actual price calculation, that's the toughest nut to crack.
It is. That's where all the rules and variables collide.
Oh, right.
But you can't just stop there. The operational side is just as complex. You have catalog management and asset management right behind them, and they demand just as much attention.
So you have to define the product correctly, and then once you sell it, you have to track what the customer is entitled to
Oh, wait.
perfectly
Yeah.
through its entire life. Excellent. Okay, that gives us our roadmap. So let's unpack this, and let's start where every customer journey begins. The catalog. This is where we define what we're selling and, I guess more importantly, build in the enforcement layer.
Yeah, the catalog is where you stop bad orders before they even happen. Let's take a classic business problem. Imagine you sell a laptop,
Okay.
and you must make sure the customer picks exactly one warranty product from a specific group of options. No more, no less.
So it's not enough to just say, hey, a warranty is required.
Mm-hmm.
We need to enforce a minimum and a maximum selection from that specific group of products. How do you build that kind of mandatory bounded rule?
You do that using something called group cardinality on the product relationship. You'd set the group cardinality to min 1 and max 1.
Wait, hold on. Why can't I just use a standard validation rule? Something that just fires if there's no warranty there at the end. Why this? Group cardinality.
Ah, that's a crucial distinction. A simple validation rule would only kick in after the configuration is done. You would just throw an error and force the user to go back. Right, which is annoying.
Exactly. Group cardinality is way better because it actually dictates the behavior of the configurator itself. The user interface actively guides the selection within that group, so it's actually impossible to finalize the configuration until those min-max bounds are met.
So it's enforcement at the point of configuration, not just a check at the end.
You got it. It controls the experience up front.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's talk about a different kind of enforcement, eligibility. What if we have these, highly specialized products, maybe some exclusive enterprise maintenance package that should only be visible to customers we've marked as a reseller?
Right. So you need to restrict visibility dynamically.
Yeah.
When you need to control product visibility based on some kind of contextual attribute like customer type, their region, even the sales channel, that's handled using a context rule.
A context rule sounds like a gatekeeper. If the context, in this case, the customer being a reseller, matches the rule, the gate opens and they can see the product. Precisely. They enforce availability or visibility based on that context. The key here is that context rules are super effective for internal sales teams, to make sure reps don't quote products to customers who aren't eligible.
Or for B2B portals where you need to hide entire sections of the catalog.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've controlled who sees what internally. But what if we need to expose the catalog structure externally? Let's say a developer is building a custom navigation menu for a brand new e-commerce site. They need to pull the whole hierarchy of product categories. What's the technical path for that?
So when you're building out external navigation, that developer has to use the Commerce API. And the specific endpoint they need is GET Commerce Web Stores, web stored product categories.
That's a very specific detail. Why is the web store part of that mandatory? Why does that matter so much?
Because in a modern enterprise system, your catalog probably isn't monolithic. You might have different categories, different bundles, or even different prices for various web stores, say, one for North America and one for Europe. So including that web store lead, make sure the external app is only grabbing the category structure that's relevant for the specific channel it's serving. It maintains that channel specificity.
That's a great technical nugget. Okay, we've navigated the catalog. Let's shift gears hard into Section 2, complex pricing. This is where I think most of these systems really earn their keep. We're moving way beyond simple list prices here.
This is the engine room, definitely. So think about a really challenging pricing scenario. The final price for a service has to depend on a combination of 3 different factors at the same time.
Okay, like what?
Let's say region, the customer tier, like gold, silver, bronze, and the specific product line.
Whoa, that's a triple dependency. So if I'm in New York, gold tier, buying hardware, I get price A. But London, silver tier, buying software gets price B. You can't handle that with just a few simple percentage discounts.
You absolutely cannot. For these kinds of multidimensional requirements where you have multiple keys determining one single output, the best tool in the pricing procedure is the lookup table.
So a lookup table is basically like a massive spreadsheet the system can reference in an instant.
That's a great way to think about it. It lets the pricing logic use all 3 of those variables, region, tier, and product line, as lookup keys simultaneously. It's just so much more efficient and scalable than trying to build some complex, nested if-then logic.
And it ensures you get a consistent, accurate price every time.
Every single time.
Okay, here's where I think it gets really interesting. Let's say you have that complex pricing procedure built. How does the system make sure it's using the latest information? A sales rep updates a, quotes, start date.
Right, because the customer delayed the project.
Exactly. And that date might affect seasonal pricing you have in your lookup table. So how does that new date actually get fed back into the calculation engine for a reprice?
This is all about how the system passes updated contextual variables, and that specific function is handled by context services mapping.
Ah, so the mapping is the bridge between the, quote, record itself and the pricing engine's variables.
It is the definition of the bridge. Mappings define that pathway. They say, take the value from this field on the, quote, like start date, and transfer it into this specific variable that the pricing procedure uses.
And without that mapping,
the pricing engine would just run with stale data and you'd get the wrong price.
You know, that clarifies the distinction we touched on earlier. If context rules control visibility, what you can see.
Right. And eligibility.
Then context services mapping controls the data flow that actually dictates the price.
That is the key differentiator. One controls what you can see and do. The other controls the data that drives the calculation. Both use context, but for totally different purposes.
That's a fantastic look at the front office. Okay, let's move past the sale and into Section 3, the asset lifecycle. We're going from calculation and agreement to active entitlement management.
This is where the paper proposal becomes a real contract. The system has to start tracking what the customer actually owns, which we call assets.
And a really frequent issue people run into is an order getting stuck. You have a signed order, it's just sitting there in draft status, and the customer assets, the things that actually drive fulfillment and billing, they aren't being created. What's the definitive trigger that turns an order into those assets?
It sounds like it should be some complex technical process, but often the solution is much simpler. It's structural. The conversion relies entirely on a status change. The standard trigger for generating assets is changing the order status to activated.
Wow. I never realized the creation of those fundamental records just hangs on that one status change. That feels like a huge choke point if it isn't managed properly.
It is, and that's why it's so critical. Until that status is activated, the order is just provisional. The system won't formalize it into a trackable entitlement. That status change is the definitive switch.
Okay, agreed. Now let's talk amendments. We have an active subscription, and the customer wants to increase their quantity mid-cycle. The business needs that new increased portion to co-terminate to end on the exact same date as the original subscription.
Yeah, co-termination is central to subscription billing. It just simplifies renewals. To do it, the system needs an authoritative date boundary.
And what provides that boundary?
The field that drives that alignment for the amendment is the lifecycle end date on the asset record itself.
So that lifecycle end date is like the system's contractual deadline marker.
Exactly. When the system processes that quantity increase, it knows to look at the lifecycle end date of the original asset and use that exact date to set the termination point for the new amended part.
And that keeps the billing schedule and the renewal date all synchronized.
Perfectly synchronized.
Got it. Now for the opposite. Termination. A customer cancels a subscription, effective immediately. We need a formal, non-negotiable record that signals the stop of all future billing. What does the cancellation flow generate to do that?
So the standard cancellation procedure will automatically generate a cancel asset action. This is a formal, irreversible action that gets recorded against that asset.
Why is the action so important? Can't we just change the asset's status to canceled?
Because the action is the formal command sent to all the downstream billing processes. Just changing a status might be a manual step, right? But generating that cancel asset action formally records the termination event. That's the transactional input the billing engine needs to stop future charges and maybe even calculate a refund.
That brings us perfectly to our final section, Section 4, Billing and Financial Classification. We're moving from just tracking entitlements to the really crucial stage of invoicing and financial reporting.
Right. And let's look at a growing revenue model. Consumption. So many modern services need to support a pay-as-you-go model. Billing is based on usage reported at the end of the month, not a flat fee.
So we're not selling a term, we're selling the capacity to consume, and we bill based on what's actually measured. Which product setting makes that possible?
You have to select the usage product selling model type. This fundamentally changes the billing behavior. Usage models are totally different from, say, term-defined or evergreen models because the calculation relies on external consumption records. You have to ingest metering data.
It's not based on a price and quantity set at the time of the sale.
Not at all.
Okay, that defines how we calculate what's owed. The last critical step is financial classification. The business has to ensure every single invoice line is correctly assigned to a specific general ledger account, the GL account, based on the product family. This is, essential for compliance.
This is where commerce meets accounting. And the way you ensure the product definition leads directly to the correct financial entry is by configuring billing treatments.
How do those treatments act as the bridge between the product and the accounting ledger?
Billing treatments are the component that standardizes financial classification. They let you define rules that link product attributes like the product family or even the region directly to the necessary financial attributes.
Such as the GL account.
The GL account, the revenue recognition treatment, the legal entity, all of it. This classification is just vital for ensuring accurate revenue postings and staying compliant.
Final question for you to think about as you wrap up this deep dive. If a customer decides to upgrade their service mid-cycle, so they're changing from a silver tier to a gold tier, which requires a complex prorated calculation, which one of the 10 mechanisms we discussed today would need to be reevaluated first to make sure the pricing engine gets the necessary new context to calculate that proration correctly.
Think about what process grabs that new tier status from the quote and actually hands it to the pricing procedure. That's your challenge.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us.
Until next time.